Liberal movements within Islam involve professed Muslims who have produced a considerable body of liberal thought on the reinterpretation and reform of Islamic understanding and practice. The work is sometimes characterized as progressive Islam. Some regard progressive Islam and liberal Islam as two distinct movements. The methodologies of liberal or progressive Islam rest on the interpretation and reinterpretation of traditional Islamic scripture and other texts, a process called ijtihad. This can vary from the slight to the most liberal, where only the meaning of the Quran is considered to be a revelation, with its expression in words seen as the work of the Prophet Muhammad in his particular time and context. As a consequence, liberal, progressive Muslims may then interpret verses from the Quran allegorically or even set them aside. Liberal Muslim intellectuals who have focused on religious reform include Muhammad Ali, Saeed al-Qimni, Irshad Manji, Nasir Abu Zaid, Khalil Abdul Karim, Abdur Karim Soursh, Muhammad Arkoon, Muhammad Sharaw, Ahmed Subhi Mansour, Edip Yüksel, Gamal al-Banna, Abdullahi Ahmed Naim, Muhammad Tahir al-Qadri, Javed Ahmad Ghamidi, Ahmed al-Gubanshi, Mahmud Muhammad Taha, and Faraj Foda. Taha was hanged in 1985 under the Sharia regime of Jafar al-Namiri, and Foda was assassinated in 1992 by al-Gamla al-Islamiyya. Some liberal Muslims see themselves as returning to the principles of the early Ummah and to acclaimed ethical and pluralistic intent of their scripture, the Quran. They distance themselves from some traditional and less liberal interpretations of Islamic law which they regard as culturally based and without universal applicability. The Reform movement uses monotheism as an organizing principle for human society and the basis of religious knowledge, history, metaphysics, aesthetics, and ethics, as well as social, economic and world order. Central tenets. Several generally accepted tenets have emerged. The autonomy of the individual in interpreting the Quran and Hadith. More liberal trends include rejecting Hadiths completely or partially by traditionalists like Gamal al-Banna, a more critical and diverse examination of religious texts, as well as traditional Islamic precedents. Complete gender equality in all aspects, including ritual prayer and observance. A more open view on modern culture in relation to customs, dress, and common practices. Certain rules on modesty amongst men and women are still self-enforced in response to the Quran's injunction against immodest dress. The individual use of ijtihad and fitra is advocated. Ijtihad is an Islamic legal term referring to independent reasoning and the thorough exertion of a jurist's mental faculty in finding a solution to a legal question. It is contrasted with taqlid. According to classical Sunni theory, ijtihad requires expertise in the Arabic language, theology, revealed texts, and principles of jurisprudence, and is not employed where authentic and authoritative texts are considered unambiguous with regard to the question, or where there is an existing scholarly consensus. Ijtihad is considered to be a religious duty for those qualified to perform it. An Islamic scholar who is qualified to perform ijtihad is called a mujtahid. Starting from the 18th century, some Muslim reformers began calling for abandonment of taqlid and emphasis on ijtihad, which they saw as a return to Islamic origins. Public debates in the Muslim world surrounding ijtihad continue to the present day. The advocacy of ijtihad has been particularly associated with Islamic modernists and purist Salafi thinkers. Among contemporary Muslims in the West there have emerged new visions of ijtihad which emphasize substantive moral values over traditional juridical methodology. Human rights moderate Islamic political thought contends that the nurturing of the Muslim identity and the propagation of values such as democracy, and human rights are not mutually exclusive, but rather should be promoted together. Most liberal Muslims believe that Islam promotes the notion of absolute equality of all humanity, and that it is one of its central concepts. Therefore, a breach of human rights has become a source of great concern to most liberal Muslims. Liberal Muslims differ with their culturally conservative counterparts in that they believe that all humanity is represented under the umbrella of human rights. Many Muslim-majority countries have signed international human rights treaties, but the impact of these largely remains to be seen in local legal systems, a point highlighted by the fact that most countries which impose conservative interpretations of Sharia law are amongst the most repressive countries in the world, while secular states are often the most open and tolerant. Muslim liberals often reject traditional interpretations of Islamic law, which allows mamlakataymanukum and slavery. They say that slavery opposed Islamic principles which they believe to be based on justice and equality, and some say that verses relating to slavery, or mamlakataymanukum, now cannot be applied due to the fact that the world has changed, while others say that those verses are totally misinterpreted and twisted to legitimize slavery. Feminism, secularism. The definition and application of secularism, especially the place of religion in society, varies among Muslim countries as it does among Western countries. As the concept of secularism varies among secularists in the Muslim world, reactions of Muslim intellectuals to the pressure of secularization also varies. On the one hand, secularism is condemned by some Muslim intellectuals who do not feel that religious influence should be removed from the public sphere. On the other hand, secularism is claimed by others to be compatible with Islam. For example, the quest for secularism has inspired some Muslim scholars who argue that secular government is the best way to observe Sharia. Enforcing through coercive power of the state negates its religious nature, because Muslims would be observing the law of the state and not freely performing the religious obligation as Muslims, says Abdullahi Ahmed An-Naim, a professor of law at Emory University and author of Islam and the Secular State, Negotiating the Future of Sharia. Moreover, some scholars argue that secular states have existed in the Muslim world since the Middle Ages. Tolerance and non-violence. Reliance on secular scholarship. Liberal Muslims tend to be skeptical about the validity of Islamization of knowledge as separate from mainstream fields of inquiry. This is usually due to the often secular outlook of Muslim liberals, which makes them more disposed to trust mainstream secular scholarship. They may also regard the propagation of these fields as merely a propaganda move by Muslim conservatives.